we could keep this very short. Galway are definitely going to win.
There's a lot of lads down the Haskell that'll be getting statues before me, so there is.
Described as a blessing that thought he was missing. A strange kind of blessing, Patrick.
That national narrative and does my head in. That we're reliant on Joe Canning. Like, oh my God.
Turkey Burke was in full forward, causing all sorts of problems. Then they were able to bring Badger on for Turkey.
Some might say he did a good job on Conor Whelan. I would say, from my point of view, that he spent half the day assaulting him.
If you want a better tomorrow, start heading for it today. Visit Tony Burke Motors, your local Toyota retailer, and find out how you can lower your emissions and pay less tax than a diesel with Toyota's incredible range of self-charging hybrid cars. There's never been a better time to join the thousands of Galway drivers who've made Toyota the #1 selling car brand in Galway for the 7th consecutive year. Visit TonyBurkeMotors.ie to search our fantastic selection of approved used cars. Start your electric journey in a Toyota hybrid today. Contact Tony Burke Motors on 480123 or email sales@TonyBurkeMotors.ie. Toyota, built for a better world.
After 30 points drubbing given out at the hands of Westmeath last weekend, Galway's Shane O'Neill's Galway, the challenge really ramps up this weekend with the welcome when they welcome Limerick to town, Pearse Stadium on Sunday. You don't get much more of a bigger task, but I suppose bigger news first, Patrick. I believe you're back training during the week there. You went back on Tuesday, Wednesday night, was it? How's the body today?
Yeah, just back on Wednesday night. Actually, better than I expected. To be honest, today now. Went out for a full 18 holes of golf earlier on, and that loosened up things another bit, so not too bad now, all in all. But yeah, no, great to be back. We had started off at 7:30 there on Wednesday night, and had to. It felt like January because the thunderstorms came down just as we were about to go onto the field. So that felt like a good bit of normality there. But yeah, no, great to be back. Great to be back doing a small bit of tipping around and a bit of running. And sure, look, things will ramp up now over the next few weeks and try to get prepared as best we can for probably September. Really looking at the first round, but. Look, at games are only about 3 weeks away, hopefully. And I'm sure once the date arrives that we're allowed playing, I'm sure we'll tear straight into them because we're mad to actually get going hurling properly again and play a couple of games, be it league or challenge or whatever way they come. You know, I think we're all just mad to get back out of the field and pull on the club shirts and get going again. You know.
Yeah, and county title in waiting, I believe, like we touched on already. Delighted to have our first guest of 2021 on as well. Aonghus Callanan is back joining us again. Aonghus, how are things?
Good now, guys. Thanks for bringing me on. It's always enjoyable chat.
Good stuff. Aonghus, did you get a look at Galway against Westmeath last weekend? What did you make of it, or what were your takeaways from it?
Galway certainly looked very fit. You know, there was obviously, you know, a lot of time and space there at times. You know, I think there was a golfing class there really, but you know, Galway's stick work and particularly their fitness looked very good. It's a very good sign going forward, you know, to, as you said, bringing on the more or less top dogs in the country this weekend.
That's for sure. And I suppose just moving on to this weekend then, Patrick, it's probably the biggest game of the league, maybe from a Galway standpoint, but definitely from a Galway standpoint, and maybe arguably from a Limerick standpoint as well, because there's probably that element that they might be doing a bit of shadow boxing with the rest of the teams, out Westmeath excluded, we'll say. You know, given that there's the probability that they might be meeting them in Munster. Galway, I suppose, coming to this game, they haven't beaten Limerick since 2017. That league meeting. They've lost 4 games on the bounce since. It's probably a game that Shane O'Neill and company will want to be laying kind of a marker down on.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I think you're right in what you say, and that, you know, in a league that doesn't mean a whole pile, I think this Sunday does mean a lot. Probably to both camps, but definitely more so Galway than Limerick. I think it's hugely important that we go out and lay down a marker on Sunday. And I know we're a very long way away from meeting Limerick again, or we may not even meet Limerick again. But you know, I think the sooner they're knocked off their perch to some degree, be it just a loss in the league, the better. You know, because you don't want them to get that same sort of momentum that they got going last year, because if they do, they're going to be awful hard to stop. So I think but even more so from Galway's own perspective, I think it's important that they go out and do hopefully get it for Limerick, because you know the Limerick lads, they've no problem saying what that win in Salt Hill in 2018 in the league meant to them, and that's what really kick-started their season, and it's kick-started what they've continued on up to right now. So like you'd be hoping that maybe if Galway can get a win like that this weekend, it might prove a similar sort of kickstart for them for the year ahead, and hopefully to take away with them in the future, because coming into that game in Salt Hill a couple of years ago, Limerick they were the ones that they've been trying to get out of that Division 1B or Division 2, whatever it was called at the time, for years, and they'd always just come up short in one hurdle, and then here they were taking on the All-Ireland champions in their own backyard, and probably as free a go at it as they were going to get. And they did get over the line, and they haven't looked back since. So the same way for Galway now coming in, there's obviously expectation within the county, and we're always considering ourselves up there as all. But in saying that, we're playing the juggernaut that is Limerick, so we're going into the game as underdogs, no question. So it's a nice way to go into it, and nice confidence booster out to take it away from last week. Limerick, they didn't look overly sharp now. Still, in fairness, finished superbly in the last quarter to draw with Tip last weekend. But they're going to be trending in the right direction. They'll improve an awful lot for that as well. Whereas you'll be hoping that Galway's sharpness that they brought to the Westmeath game, they'll be able to transfer that to the game on Sunday now, where there's going to be an awful lot more questions asked of them.
Well, that's it exactly, and you touched on that game there in Salt Hill in 2018, and they were 8 points. Galway were leading the game by 8 points at half time, and Limerick somehow turned it around and got the result. And by later that summer, they were the ones climbing the Hogan stand and picking up Liam McCarthy. So these games, it's probably since then Limerick have really taken over Aonghus. They've been the dominant team, not just against Galway. They've beaten Galway in their last 4 meetings, 2 of them in under Shane O'Neill. I suppose it's kind of one of these games where you kind of want to stop the rot, really, isn't it? You want to get maybe even if you're not winning, you want to have a real shot at it, have it, or maybe perhaps getting a win down the line. You want to be still in contention with 10, 15 minutes to go and have a crack at kind of knocking them out of it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, as Patrick said there, Galway are in a great position. I think John Kiley, said after the match the last day, he felt they were maybe a bit behind teams in terms of their level of training and level of fitness. And if anything, Galway looked, bar maybe Cork, to be one of the fittest teams there last weekend. So it's a great opportunity. I mean, they've lost the last 4 games to Cork or to Limerick now. As coming into Galway, obviously you won't have the crowd there, but it's really important to try and knock them off their perch, as Patrick said. That this team, this year's championship, I think momentum is going to be huge, and a win for Galway. Move on again to next week's game. Then again, keep that momentum, keep that winning mentality going. If you suffer a 5 or 6 point loss now, it might knock you back a bit, and you have a quick turnaround again. And things could unravel fairly quickly. So Galway have a great opportunity. Everybody's fit. Everybody seems to be flying it. And I think that the guys that I suppose the more established fellas could be held in reserve again, and bring them on with the 20 minutes to go, last half an hour, sort of like Limerick did to draw the game last weekend, and give Galway that push then over the line, hopefully this weekend.
I think it's probably a performance is probably one of the things we'd be most looking for. Or is it the victory, or is it a win you'd be looking for first and foremost? Or what would you be hoping to get? So you put yourself now in Shane O'Neill's, the management team's shoes. What would you be hoping to get out of the game?
For me, I really want to win this weekend. I think the rest of the games they can perform whatever way they want, and hopefully well in them. But if there's a game, if you were to ask Shane O'Neill right now, off the record probably, what of the remaining games of the league he wants to win, it's the Limerick one, no question about it. And I think if we beat Limerick, and if we lose a game or two after that, I wouldn't be overly fussed. But I think it's really important that they win this weekend. But the reality is, if they're to win this weekend, the performance is going to have to come with it. It's just not going to happen otherwise, because Limerick, whether or not they are a small bit behind, which in fairness they did look a bit that way definitely on Saturday, I thought. And still Tip couldn't beat them, even though Tip went into that game with the same mindset that Galway are going to have this weekend, because you could see it, how up for that game Tip were, and they looked different sort of teams and how they approached the game in terms of their mindset. Tip were the ones that really looked like they were hungry to win that game. but they still couldn't actually do it. And that's because I suppose of the aura that Limerick have built up, and that confidence that they have from winning. Once they got a sniff of it late on, they just had it in their heads that we're going to get something out of this game, even though they were 5 points down, wasn't it? Just inside the last quarter, the last day, which is a place where Tip should be driving on and win that game, but they still couldn't do it. And it wasn't like there was a goal or anything like that turned the game on its head. Limerick just got their tails up for the last 10 or 15 minutes and dragged them back and just got the draw out of it. So, definitely a win for me is more important this weekend. But if the win comes, it's going to come off the back of a very good performance, because nothing other than that is going to be good enough to beat Limerick, I think, anyhow.
Yeah, that's it. It is going to be a tough ask to get a result. You just look at Limerick's current form, having been beaten since July 2019 in the semi-final against Kilkenny. Last weekend against Tip, first round of the league. You think they might be a bit vulnerable. They don't start Dan McCormack, Declan Hannon, Cian Lynch, Gerard Hegarty, Aaron Gillan, Graham Mulcahy. A couple of them came on, maybe Declan Hannon and Mulcahy. I don't know if they carry ankle injuries, heard that, but they still managed to eke out a draw and keep this unbeaten record going against a fired up Tip. Like it's going to be a tough ask to get a result, isn't it?
Absolutely, as Patrick said, you're not going to get a win without a performance. They have to come hand in hand, and primarily you need to be focusing on the performance. It can't be about trying to get a win, But Galway, of all the teams, are best matched here to challenge Limerick. They have the physical conditioning done. They have the physicality around the middle of the field. They have fellas they can bring off the bench. They need to tighten up certainly at the back. But Limerick aren't shooting the lights out to a degree. I know they did last year, but against Tip there, Tip withdrew their whole full forward line there for the last quarter, and it really tightened up around the middle. And Galway are certainly going to have to bring that template. I think it's a bit like the Kilkenny teams of the late 2000s. There, you have to match them. You have to play. They drag you down to the way they want you to play, and you have to match it. And it's a great opportunity for Galway. As Patrick said, it's kind of a free shot, but it would be really good to build confidence and to get that victory.
Absolutely. And I suppose, Patrick, out the names I listed, multiple all-stars there, between Dan Morrissey, Declan Hannon, Cian Lynch, Gerard Hegarty, Aaron Gillan, and Graham Mulcahy. Who of them do you see coming in next weekend against Galway, and who do you maybe see out of the Limerick side dropping out of things?
Yeah, well, I think the latest update I heard was with regard to Hannon and Mulcahy, and was they were both ankle injuries, both rolling the ankles more so than anything, and I think Hannon is further down the line in terms of recovery, and they're hoping he might get a full session in this week, so he might be in contention. I don't know, is he necessarily going to start? I think Mulcahy is it's probably going to come too soon for him, and John Cuddy is not going to be. He's not in a position where he needs to rush these fellas back. It's not. This isn't the be all end all for them, and it's he won't be too fussed if they relinquish their league crown this year. It's all about defending the All Ireland for them. But in saying that, we know the strength and depth they have in that panel, and we saw it last weekend. Even what the bench they were bringing on was ridiculous. But I'd say Cian Lynch is in a good position to probably come back in and start. Gillan wasn't even in the squad last week, so I don't know what the story is there, but if he's fit, I'd imagine he'll probably come back in as well. And just look, Dan Morrissey might well slot back in somewhere as well, and might nearly come back in the half back line if he's coming back into the hole, because having played full back last year, Richie English is back now again this year, so they might be in a better position where they can move him back out to the half back line. So it's whatever team they put out, it's going to be very strong, and they're going to be thrown in maybe these couple of other fellas, the likes of an Aaron Costello cornerback, or an attacking whatever Conor Boylan, or these sort of fellas who, they're fellas fighting for their place in the starting team, but they're nearly household names at this stage in terms of what they're top class players able to fill that spot, and they're not exactly new fellas being blooded for the first time or anything like that. And they're the fellas you could say we might target that ladder, and they're well capable inter-county hurlers. So whatever 15 go out, they're going to be formidable opposition, that's for sure.
Yeah, Aonghus Galway, more than Limerick, they rested a good chunk of the regular frontliners as well against Westmeath, which is probably understandable given the golfing class between them. Joe Kenny, David Burke, Dahi Burke, Pádraig Mannion, Adrian Toohey, starters on an All-Ireland winning team. I know you mentioned it early on that maybe they might hold back some of them lads as well, but is there any of them that you potentially see starting, or how do you see that playing out?
I don't really know, to be honest. Personally, I think, the majority of the guys who got the jersey last weekend did enough to justify holding on to it, particularly up front. Most of the forwards showed up well. Jarlath and Evan certainly gave good performances, and you'd see them very hard done by not to be picked again. So I think it'd be much better really to bring this experience off the bench. We know that Limerick kind of do the same thing. They unload the bench in the last 20 minutes, and they seem to either claw teams back or pull away from teams. So if Galway have that ammunition in reserve, at this stage it might be better to just hold them guys and give the big push when needed then with the last 20 minutes to go. But in saying that, you just don't know what way Shane will approach it. He might go all guns blazing at the very beginning as well.
Well, that's it, Patrick, because you still want to be in the game. You don't want the game over at half time either. If you did decide to leave a few of these lads out, I suppose probably the most interesting one will be Joe Kenning. Like, does he start? Does he come straight back in? It's like, where do you actually accommodate Joe Kenning? Like, what a headache to have. Like, you have former hurler of the year, 5-time All-Star. But like, who do you actually drop from the attack when you think about it? We mentioned it last week. It's probably the two quietest lads last Saturday evening were Brian Kincannon and Conor Whelan, and for me, they're automatic choices. Then you have Conor Cooley scored 1-5, Niall Burke scored 1-4, Jarlath Mannion scored 1-3, Evan Island scored 13 points, and 3 of them from play. Where exactly do you fit Joe into that? Like, it's not a case of fitting Joe in, like he fits in, and every team in the country still. But how do you see that playing out there?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because like for me, I've no problem seeing, like, I don't think they're all going to come back into the team, but I think a couple of them might definitely. But for me, I wouldn't like to see them coming in at the expense of an Evan Island or a Ja Mannion, who showed up this week. I think, at the end of the day, while league is important, and this Sunday is definitely an important game, as I said already. Still it is championship is the main goal, and we are in a position where we're looking for a couple of new bodies for a championship. So if you're Evan Island going out scoring 13 points last week, and then he's not involved from the start this week, like what's the point of that? I don't see the point of that myself personally, because it's this Sunday where Evan Island is going to learn, not last week. Jogging around the place, throwing over points in Mullingar. This is as close to championship as he's going to get, and he got a small taste of it last year, but Ja Mannion didn't. And there's lads further back the way as well. Finton, I think it has to start this weekend. Shane Cooney, if he's looking at him at 6, I think he has to play for championship potentially. He has to play 6 this weekend. The likes of those sort of lads that he has in his mind, that these lads could be lads that we take with us, that could potentially start in championship. I think they all need to play it this weekend. As regards Joe, I'd love to see Joe get a couple of games at full forward again, and just try to get back to where we were at, kind of in around 2012. And I know he's not the same man, in fairness, as he was back then. The body's been through an awful lot since, but geez, I think if he gets a ball in his hand at 14, I think he can do an awful lot of damage still. And it's something I'd love to see them just work a bit. And the links are going to be there, the understanding is going to be there with different lads that he's obviously played us for the last 7 or 8 years. I think he could do a treat for us there, full forward, and whether he starts there this weekend or not, or if he starts at all this weekend, we don't know. But I'd certainly love to see him get a bit of game time there throughout the league, because he got a small bit of it there against Limerick in championship, and just the way Galway approached the game that evening, it didn't lend itself to being an inside forward in that game where they're next to man in front of them all the time. It was difficult to make any real headway, and he wasn't getting that sort of quality one-on-one ball, be it up in the air or down the ground, that you would like to see coming his way. So yeah, no, it's something I'd like to see tried for a couple of games and see how he gets on in the league, and see is it another option we could take with us into championship.
That's for sure. That's exactly it, though, because maybe Limerick might be the game to trial him out, because he could be working off limited supply in there. We saw against, I think Tip in the second half against Limerick the last day. I think they only had 5 shots in play in the second half alone, which is it's telling enough. You're probably not going to get a whole lot of supply. Maybe the game against Tip the following week might be the one to give him the run there if you want to try it. Speaking of trying in the positions, I suppose Dahi's one is another one, Aonghus, that'll be very interesting. Maybe we're plenty of growing calls maybe around the county over the last while. To maybe give him a trial out around centre back, maybe midfield even. Do you see he's another one that you kind of have to fit in? Would you be willing to give him a run maybe a bit further out, maybe at 6 or maybe 8 or 9 this weekend?
Oh, if something's not broke, don't try and fix it. I mean, 4 All-Stars at full back, it's he's an incredibly steady pair of hands back there. Never ever let Galway down, unless he's injured. Being honest, I'd see him as full back, really, being honest. He's just too solid to shift him over there. Although for the club, he's been phenomenal out around the middle and all that, but I just think for the security he offers Galway back there, and I suppose if the management are going to persist with Aina, it's good to have that steady pair of hands in front of him with a kind of a relatively newish keeper,
Another one defensively, maybe Pádraig Mannion, captain wise, you'd expect him to come back in. Aonghus as well. You'd be where are you slotting him in? Or are you slotting him in again this weekend? I know it's very hard to tell. Yeah.
I don't know if he'll start this weekend, but again, I don't think Pádraig worked that well really as sweeper. I think wing back, All-Star wing back, nominee for Hurl of the Year. That's his position. That's his best position in my opinion. He can shift across to both wings. He could maybe even go midfield, but generally wing back is the place for Pádraig. He puts in some stellar performances there, and teams try and target him with high balls, and he invariably comes out on top anytime he's been challenged in the last couple of years.
That's for sure. Would that be something you'd kind of agree with as well, Patrick? Would it be wing back for Pádraig, or would you like to see maybe him trial with Callanan midfield? Maybe the kind of midfield game these days, you kind of have one lad who's a bit more focused on defensive aspects of the game, and then if you had Pádraig there, maybe not an out-and-out sweeper, but maybe a deep line midfielder, and then you Cahill maybe licensed to roam. He can do so much damage in that sense. And I suppose it'd probably be hard on Johnny Cohen, but he after he had a good game against Westmeath as well. But Johnny Cohen is he's in his 30s now. He's it's a grueling enough schedule as well. Where would you see Pádraig if he did come back in? Where would you see him playing?
Yeah, again, it's either or for me really. 5 or 8, I think, or possibly even shifting into 6. But yeah, I think I'd be interested to see how we get on up with Cahill midfield and how the two of them would work together, because I think Johnny Cohen deserves an awful lot of credit for last weekend as well. Cahill was man of the match and was outstanding going forward, but Johnny Cohen was on David Glenn for most of the game and didn't give him a sniff of it. And Johnny Cohen doing his job to such great effect makes Cahill Mannion do his job to such great effect in that it gives him more of a license to roam around the place and get on ball and get into those advanced positions and pin the sort of passes that we saw him pinning last weekend. So it's a selfless sort of a role, and the only danger for me with Pádraig doing that as well is that are you taken away from what Pádraig Mannion actually brings to the game, and could he have more of a presence if you're asking him to play in that sort of defensive midfield role? Will he actually have more of a bearing on the game if he's just playing as wing back, as right half back or whatever? I think he possibly could, but certainly if it's something again I'd like to try to see how it gets on. But for me, looking at it now, I think I'd say wing back for a championship anyhow. Probably be the best fit for him and best fit for Galway really. Yeah.
You mentioned Ian Murphy there, Aonghus, beforehand as well. I suppose is one of those games maybe there wasn't a whole lot riding on it, should I say. He switched off for a second. He was duly punished for the goal as well. We know the struggles. Maybe he had a tough enough time as well. Now, it wasn't all his fault against Limerick in the previous semi-final. I suppose the options there with Scahill going now is Darragh Fahey. He's probably the first choice backup keeper. If not, probably It's probably just. Would you see any change there, or do you think the lads will probably persist with Éanna?
I think they'll stay with the tried and tested now. You know, this isn't really the game to be throwing in somebody out of the new, especially in the goalkeeping position. He built up, particularly last year, this year, a good relationship with some of the backs there, and you know, they know the calls and particularly puck outs and stuff like that. So, but I do agree. You know, he just needs a steady, solid game now. You know, even if he doesn't stop, you know, the bullets or make any phenomenal saves, just the bread and butter stuff, really. You know, puck outs, you know, under the high ball. I mean, you know, it might be a bit harsh, but like, you know, he was, even against Kilkenny, you could argue maybe one of the goals shouldn't have went in either, you know. So he's very steady most of the time, and that's what you want, but it just needs to be steady all of the time. You know, kind of back to what we had with Cullen before, really. You know, just a real steady pair of hands. Nobody gives out to a goalkeeper if he doesn't stop the bullet or doesn't make the outrageous save. It's everybody kind of expects it to go in. It's more demoralising when there's a bad mistake or, you know, sharp puck out is intercepted or whatever like that. So just the bread and butter, steady out and get back on his feet again.
Brilliant. Yeah, I'd firmly agree with that. I suppose, Patrick, one kind of position where it's probably, you know, there's a real fight for the jersey might be the cornerback one of the cornerback spots. We have plethora of options there. We had Jack Fitz started the last day. Maybe things didn't go his way. Lads wanted to keep a full complement on the field, so he only saw 20 plus minutes of action. Darren Morrissey came on from. Then you had TJ Brennan come on. You had Declan Cronin come on. You have other options there. You have Stephen Barrett as well. Your own clubman as well, Aonghus. There's huge competition for that now over the coming weeks, isn't there, Patrick, at cornerback?
There is, yeah. It's you know, all the names you listed there, they're some of the top club hurlers in the county, and you know, it's about making that transition now and into the inter-county shirt and hopefully being able to perform at the same level. But looking at it there now, you'd say TJ and Darren Morrissey are probably the two in the strongest position, that they have a bit of experience under their belt. And, you know, they've played some league games, a couple of championship games, Darren Morrissey especially. They're probably the two that you're looking at that you'd want to see at least one of them hopefully nail down a spot for championship. And, you know, I'd say there's a fair chance you might see the two of them nearly starting this weekend. Definitely one of them, anyhow, in one of those cornerback spots. And you know, the other lads you're listening there, the Declan Cronins and Stephen Barretts, who aren't in the panel actually that long, like as I mentioned last week, you know, these Galway lads are only back training whatever 3 weeks, or maybe just a bit more now, a month nearly. And you know, as the league goes on, they're going to get more comfortable, more used to the setup, and probably be in a better position to get a bit of game time in the couple of rounds that are coming after this. But yeah, I think Darren Morrissey and TJ are certainly in a strong position to start, and you know, it'd be good to see them pitting themselves against top quality forwards, be it a Peter Casey or an Aaron Gillan or Seamus Flandy, and whoever comes their way. You know, they're going to get a serious test, whoever it is. So yeah, it's the game to start one of them and see how they get on, I think, anyhow.
Aonghus, I meant to actually touch on it earlier, but your own clubman, Ty isn't there anymore. Obviously, he's no longer involved in the panel. But you've say Shane dropped it in two of your own lads there in Stephen that we already mentioned, and Jack Hastings as well. Do you see them kicking on now? You'd have worked closely with them, obviously, in training and stuff like that. You'd have seen them up close, probably a lot more than we would have. We've only seen them in matches. What do you think of their prospects maybe down the line? Maybe not this year, it might be a bit too soon, but maybe, you know, 2 or 3 years down the line for Galway.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's fantastic for our club to have two guys involved. You know, we probably felt with the club success it should have been 1 or 2 more before this, but that's a different story. But you know, there's certainly two of the top lads we have. You know, you mentioned Peter Casey there, Patrick. We played a challenge against the Pearse before, and Stephen sorted out Peter Casey, so he did. But, maybe Peter wasn't trying that hard on a challenge match. But yeah, look, they can get nothing but benefit from being involved. You know, the quality of training. I suppose they wouldn't have that much exposure to intercounty at underage. I think Jack maybe was on an under 21 panel and minor panel, but didn't really seal a place or nail a starting position. So It's great for us. I mean, two lads involved, they're surely to improve their fitness, their hurling. By all accounts, Jack Hastings is flying it, you know, from the physical conditioning side of it. Really well up near the top of the stakes in terms of the testing and whatever else they do. So, you know, you'd hope that they get some game time. You know, they can do nothing but gain from it. Jack is certainly physically able for intercounty, there's no doubt in that. And Stephen, I suppose, just needs to bed in, you know, get used to the setup and bring his hurling up to speed. But, you know, they're two very good committed guys, you know, both take it very, very seriously, and they can certainly be great additions to a Galway panel anyway. You know, they'll really be committed to it, give it their all, and you know, really, really keen on progressing their hurling careers. So, as you said, it's a huge benefit for our club, and I hope that Galway reap the benefits from it as well if the guys can get game time.
Absolutely. Patrick, I suppose tactically from a Galway standpoint, I suppose one person we haven't mentioned yet is Joseph Cooney. He had such a fine maybe championship last year in the half back line and wing back. Up until the Limerick game, everything was looking solid. He was probably in the Galway's top 3 players, if not maybe 1 or 2. Even came on the last day. Maybe he's the type of fella maybe that he needs a couple of games to get his sharpness up in terms of hurling. Maybe his touch wasn't 100%. You know, maybe physically conditioning wise as well. Maybe he looked slightly off it in comparison to the rest of the players. Came on and wing forward. I know we touched on it the last day. Is that where you see his role now this year for Galway? You know, in 2021.
Yeah, and last year, you know, I was all for the Joseph Cooney halfback, and I think it worked a treat most of the year, in fairness, and you know, probably struggled a bit with Garrett integrity, but there was no shame in that last year. But looking ahead to this year, to be honest, I only want to see him in the half-hour line, really, and I know that's a big change in the space of a couple of months. But I feel, you know, looking back at that Limerick game last year, we got absolutely slaughtered on our own puckouts. Whether they went short or long, we got slaughtered. You know, and we didn't play a sweeper last week. We probably weren't going to play a sweeper in any case. But you know, it's looking like we're probably going to go more orthodox. I think that's our best chance of beating them this week if we actually front up and go man on man with them, because you know, if they have an extra man in the back, we're just not going to get the scores, and we're probably going to need a goal or two to win it. And we're not going to get that if they have the extra man sitting in front, because they're hard enough to break down if you're going man on man with them. Never mind giving them an extra man. Plus, if they have that extra body there on our puckouts, you know, that's the main reason really why we got clean so much on the long ones last year. And the short ones, they just read them well and were able to put pressure on and force the errors. But you know, to counter, obviously, if we're going man on man and we're going long with puckouts, we need size under them, and you know, we probably don't have that many big ball winners that, you know, you could possibly try putting Niall Burke out there on the wing a bit. But Joseph is certainly a lad I'd like to see there, and Conor Cooney as well. And yeah, I think it's where he's needed most. And I think, you know, some of the names you've listed out there for spots like cornerback, they're lads capable of filling out at wing back as well. And you know, we have Finton and Shane and Dahi and Porritt come back in again this week. So I think we're fairly well stocked. We've Adrian Chowie as well, who can obviously play anywhere in the backs really. We're fairly well stocked in that department, and we have to settle on a 6 yet, but we have the resources there to be able to do it. But I do think we need a ball winner or two in the half forward line. And it's actually something I wanted to ask you, Aonghus. Like, you know, obviously Jack Hastings, you know, we're not saying he's going to be a lad who's going to take over and dominate in championship for Galway, but he's the kind of lad, the kind of player, you know, you see the role he plays for you with Mellows, getting up and down that line, and the work he does both on your own puckouts and on the opposition puckouts. He's the kind of player that Galway are crying out for in that half forward line, isn't he?
Yeah, look, Jack is ready made. I think if he can get his hurling up to speed, you know, physically there's absolutely no worries with Jack. You know, he'll throw his body about. He will get really, really stuck in, and has the athletic capability to last 70 minutes up and down the line. And I suppose sometimes with a new player, that naivety can be to your advantage. You know, you're not thinking about where your position is or what you should be doing. You're just, you know, playing with a freedom. So as I said, if Jack can get a run there, I've no doubt that he'll put himself about. There's never any fear from that regard with Jack, anyway. But back to Joseph Cooney, I agree with you completely. Joe has played his best hurling for Galway at wing forward. I think he had good spells last year, but put lads in their best, most comfortable position. And I think for Joe, that's wing forward.
Perfect. Patrick mentioned there, Aonghus, about Galway probably needing to go orthodox to beat Limerick. Is that something you'd agree with, or how do you think? How can Galway, in your opinion, get over this Limerick juggernaut, these massive green giants?
It's simply to match them in every single department that you possibly can. If you look at the game against Kilkenny when they were beaten in 2019, Kilkenny just outworked them, physically matched them, outworked them, and wore them down as much as possible. And that's simply what Galway have to do. There's no magic formula here other than tenacious hard work, taking your chances, being disciplined, and matching them up physically. I think sweepers, changing up your formation. Limerick have seen it all before. The only way is to match them pound for pound the way they play.
Absolutely. Patrick, I suppose one thing of stopping Limerick is we've seen the damage that Flanagan, Gillane can do inside. The quality of ball, that these diagonal balls like coming in from the likes of Kyle Hayes, Jeremy Burns, even Keane Lynch spraying them round. They're very hard to stop. That's probably a crucial aspect of maybe trying to get over Limerick as well. If we can stop the get good quality of ball, because they're a defender's nightmare, aren't they? From yourself playing cornerback, they're what 80-20 in the attacker's favour if you have these type of quality balls coming in.
Yeah, and you're spot on, because if that ball is coming in, the sweeper is redundant in any case because the quality of the ball is too good and the sweeper is too much ground to cover. So for me, the key is cutting it off at source. And if we have that extra body up there, your 6 forwards, your 2 midfielders, you have a better chance of doing that. And you have a better chance of at least, something we'd often touch on in training over the last number of years is putting dirt on the ball at least when it's coming in, so that Limerick are going to get plenty of balls into their attack, but make it as 50-50 as you possibly can, and that comes from applying pressure to their ball players in the half-back line. And if they have the option of they have an extra man there and they can work a 1-2 or whatever and get the extra man in space, get him on the ball, he's going to nail that 80-20 ball into the corner forward, the full forward every time. And it makes Pádraig Mannion or whoever sleeping totally redundant. So that's why another reason why I just think they need to push up on them and apply pressure at the source where the ball is going to be launched in. And as I say, put dirt on it and make it as 50-50 as you possibly can. And that gives our backs as good a chance as they're forward to win the ball. And if he doesn't win the ball after that, that's his problem. He needs to sort out his own corner, but give him as much help as you possibly can before the ball comes in the first place,
One thing about Limerick that's very interesting, I find, Aonghus, is the lack of goals maybe at either end when you're playing for them. They don't score a whole pile, but they very rarely concede any, and they cough up very little chances. Like, how do Galway even go about creating goal chances against this Limerick team? They look so good defensively.
Yeah, they do, but I suppose the key is movement, really. And we have good pace now. Jarlath, Connor, if he can get going. Brian Concannon. If they have the likes of Joe or whoever playing in good quality ball into them guys, I think they'll create goals, David. It's a matter about the quality ball and making sure that they have movement inside. As regards that they don't score goals, they don't really try to work goals. If they have an overlap or anything like that, they generally just tend to tap it over. It doesn't seem to be in their game plan really to actively seek out goals. No, hopefully I don't live to regret that this weekend.
We won't be getting you on again.
But I think that the key really for any forward is plenty of movement and the quality of ball coming in. If you can create the space for yourself, the goals will come with the quality we have inside. So I think it's a matter of both sides of the coin. The defenders being able to play in quality ball to you, and the guys inside creating the space through movement. I think Galway have the ability to get goals. I mean, they scored 5 last weekend. They should have scored 8 or 9. You know, they had plenty of opportunities there, really.
Just one thing that we mentioned probably on Monday's podcast, or was it Sunday? The days are all coming into the one, right? But I just got to get your opinion on Aonghus. Was that the advantage rule and the kind of controversy around it last weekend? You're a forward now who would, you know, if you got your chance and you were bearing down and goal, you wouldn't want the ref blowing it and pulling it back for the free. You'd like the play to flow and continue. I'm sure. Like, is that how did you assess the first weekend of it, or are people reading too much into it, or what are your thoughts on it?
Usually with these new rules, when they come in first, you know, the referees are very conscious of it, and they're worried about not being ticked off by their assessor for it, and actively trying to implement these new rules. But at the end of the day, as the championship goes on, these things fizzle out, and I think the same thing will kind of happen with this, really, to be honest. Referees, once if we start getting crowds back into the stadium, and you know the stakes get higher, the game is let flow a lot better, and you know, I don't see it having a major influence on this season's championship, really. It might, the next couple of rounds, there might be a few controversial incidents, but referees are human, and they cop on to what's right and wrong, and allow the game to flow, you know. Perfect.
And look, finally, I'm going to put you on the spot first. How do you see it going, or can we even predict a result here? Can we even get a prediction? It's so early. It's so hard to judge. Like, I don't think anyone could say anything to us, no matter what way you go.
Yeah, I know. As I said to Patrick, it'd be easier to do this if we knew the teams. But and then I could sort out my fantasy hurling team as well. But
I was coming to that.
But I suppose, you know, Galway couldn't ask for a better opportunity. You know, they've had a fairly easy opening round. They're in great shape physically. You know, Limerick are you know, acknowledged themselves as being a bit behind the coin in terms of their fitness and hurling, and would have had to put a lot of work into last weekend to get to eke out a draw. So I'm going to, you know, stay with the home colours and give Galway a 1 or 2 point victory.
Patrick, I'll get your prediction now.
Yeah, no, I like about that, and based on, you know, Aonghus covered it really, what's going in Galway's favour, and that, you know, it's clear to see that they're in good nick, and you know, that's down to whatever they're doing themselves, but also whatever obviously the management have been providing with them and telling them to do. You know, it's obviously got them tailor-made that they're in fairly good nick for this, and you know, they're obviously going to improve again over the next 2 weeks, but they're coming in off the back of a confidence boost and win performance. You know, they look sharp. Whether they're actually that sharp, we'll find out very quickly on Sunday. But I think in terms of preparation and the position they could be in heading into the game, we couldn't ask for ourselves being a better spot going into the game. And yeah, look, we'll nail the colours to the mast and stick with the home colours, as Aonghus said, and hopefully a couple points win for Galway, and top of the league heading into round 3.
Top of the league. Will just fantasy wise, Aonghus, have you any big recruits coming in? Any big signings down there?
I need a complete overhaul. I need. I think 1/3 of my team didn't even start, so I have to. I have a lot of surgery to do, I think, to try and salvage some pride.
You weren't getting any bad advice, because I heard on Anthony Daly's podcast that Mark Landers texted Anthony Daly asking him who was on the freeze for Galway, and Daly said Niall Burke will be definitely taking them. He was feeding them poor information. He said Niall Burke will be definitely taking them anyway. And
I thought Anthony Daly now getting closer to the Galway club scene would know the gig.
Well, not only that, but he made Evan Nilan captain. But Landers was telling the story anyway that he saw the first free landed anyway, and Jesus, he saw that Evan Nilan came in Overton and hit him instantly about this young fella that came on against Limerick and nailed the 2 frees. And he was like, "God, Jesus Christ!" Like, but yeah, Patrick, you have a bit of catching up to do yourself, no more than Aonghus. Like, this just you're leaving me to try and do all the fighting at the top to give for this jersey, like.
Well, look, it's grand to start well, like, but you know, we've seen, you know, we were 8 points up in Limerick a couple of years ago, and we didn't finish the job. So there's a lot of work to be done yet, and a lot of rounds to be played. And I think the key is getting the team right for this weekend, because you've a couple of transfers this week, but after that you're whatever you pick this week is what you're going to have to stick with it for a few weeks. So I think it's this weekend and the weekend after is where this is going to be one and last. And look, we won't give up hope yet. We're hoping to pick up 7 or 8 spots on the leaderboard this weekend and the same the week after. And if we stay doing that, sure, we might be too far off for a finish,
Yeah, you'll run out of weeks afterwards, so there's only 5 weeks left. You have a bit of work to do still.
8 spots every week, I'll be laughing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have a few transfers to make myself, I'd say. So we're studying. I'm looking forward to these teams being met out as well. I've my eyes there on top 5 anyway for a finish. So could make a couple of shrewd transfers. There's a few lads that I need to get rid of. I think Kevin Foley, maybe Mark Coleman, a couple of these lads, they just didn't do it for me for last time out. So I'm ruthless enough like that. I'll have to get rid of them. So look at lads, we'll leave it there. Please God, we're looking at a positive result at the weekend. Hopefully, I haven't even checked the weather. Only God knows we didn't mention that, but we're sick of talking about the weather when we mentioned Pearse Stadium. But hopefully, we won't have too much of a bearing on the game. The ground might be a bit wet, a bit soft out there at the moment. But hopefully, there's a bit of drying before the weekend, and a good, maybe as you touched on there, maybe a 1 or 2 point victory could be massive for Galway. You'd never know; it could be the kickstart to a great year. So, as we leave it there, thanks a million for tuning in or joining us again. And just to finish off, as always, thanks to our sponsors, Tony Burke Motors, for coming on board. Without them, it wouldn't be possible. So they've come on board for the entire league, and it's a huge addition to have, and just to have the backing. So if anyone looking to buy a new or used car, be sure to call in there. They're located in Ballybrit, and give us a mention. I'm sure that they might sort you out with some kind of deal or something like that. Yeah,
for us.
we haven't negotiated the commission yet. English are in line for a new car and like that. Yeah.
Oh, I've already given the business story.
Good man. That's what I like to hear. Look, we'll leave it there. Thanks a million, lads.
Thanks, guys.
If you want a better tomorrow, start heading for it today. Visit Tony Burke Motors, your local Toyota retailer, and find out how you can lower your emissions and pay less tax than a diesel with Toyota's incredible range of self-charging hybrid cars. There's never been a better time to join the thousands of Galway drivers who've made Toyota the #1 selling car brand in Galway for the 7th consecutive year. Visit TonyBurkeMotors.ie to search our fantastic selection of approved used cars. Start your electric journey in a Toyota hybrid today. Contact Tony Burke Motors on 480123 or email sales@TonyBurkeMotors.ie. Toyota, built for a better world.